The process of transforming your digital photos into exquisite fine art prints, ready for competition judging, can be a daunting task. Some of the frustrations are things like your print looking too dark or too bright, too flat, choosing the right paper, and the nightmarish task of translating the tonal range of your file into the printed form. Our focus in this video will be on the crucial factors and the steps that you need to take to create a high quality fine art print. Hopefully by the end of this video you will have a better understanding on how to create prints that are not only stunning but also worthy of recognition and perhaps win an award or two. Before we delve into the specifics of fine art printing, let's emphasize the most important part of this mesmerizing jigsaw puzzle and the foundation of precision. This foundation begins here with the monitor, your only true window into your image file. A color managed workflow then seamlessly carries this precision from your camera to your editing software and finally to the printer. This is not just about creating beautiful prints, it's about crafting images that stand out, especially prints that are going to be judged in a print competition by experienced judging panels. The first step is working on a high quality calibrated monitor. Good quality monitors that are ideal for digital and printmaking work, like this ISO 279X, have a matte surface, not a shiny reflective gloss coating. Gloss is bad in every way. It increases contrast, which we don't want. We want a true representation of our tonal range and not an exaggerated one. Gloss dramatically increases the reflective characteristics of the screen, which is again very bad, making it difficult to see past reflections to get to our image. The matte surface minimizes reflections and allows for a very pleasing, natural, three-dimensional quality. If you want to know more about the specifics of monitor calibration and the settings used in order to match print to screen and vice versa, you can go to my comprehensive video on my YouTube channel via the link below this video. Assuming you have a calibrated screen, your first attempt at printmaking may yield a less than favourable result, and you may notice considerable difference between screen and print. Now these differences may vary. The print may be too dark or the print might appear flat and muddy. To understand why this is so, let's begin with the fundamental difference between a screen and a print. Now when we're viewing images on a screen, they appear vibrant and luminous due to the fact that we are looking at a backlit display. The light source is transmissive. Light is being pushed through and the illuminated pixels form an image on the screen, making it appear luminous and punchy. On a print, however, we're looking at reflected light. The amount of light and its colour determines how your print looks. If the light is too dim, then the print might appear too dark. And if the light has a certain colour, like maybe tungsten or fluorescent, then you might notice a significant colour shift in your colours on your print. Another significant difference is the contrast range of your monitor is usually around 1000 to 1 versus a printed image which is around 200 to 1. High-end monitors like this one here will allow you to change this to emulate your printing environment. All prints to be judged will be illuminated using daylight balanced lighting set at 5000 degrees Kelvin and set at a specific intensity. This intensity is equivalent to an exposure set at 100 ISO f2.8 and 1/25th of a second. The viewing stands are made by GTI graphic technology, similar to the one you see here on the screen. So at the most basic level, we need to set up some kind of lighting scenario that emulates that environment in our printing environment. You can do this very simply with a daylight balance LED with a high CRI set in the high 90s, and we set this to the specific intensity. Of course, investing in a proper GTI viewing booth would be ideal. Award prints demand excellence in dynamic range. Your image needs to preserve details, even in the most subtle shadows and highlights. The scrutiny your print faces in award competitions means lost details in shadows and highlights are magnified. You need to fine-tune your images to maintain nuances in these areas. The judges will appreciate the attention to detail, giving your photograph an edge in a very competitive field. Now, assuming we have done our print and we feel that we need more detail in either shadow, midtones or highlights, how do we adjust our file? Well, let's go through a couple of simple techniques on how to manipulate the dynamic range of your image to best fit the paper of your choice. So let's begin in Lightroom. Okay, so we're here inside of Lightroom and we have our image. and we might have printed this image and felt that perhaps we might want to have a little bit more shadow details. Now, the first thing we need to do, of course, is create a soft proof. Now, soft proofing is nothing more than an emulation of what your image is going to look like on a specific type of paper. So to get to our soft proofing dialog, we hit the S key on the keyboard, and this will bring up our soft proofing dialog box that you see here on the top right hand side of the screen. Now, where it says profile here, this is what we need to click on. We need to click on that, and paper profiles that you have downloaded from the paper manufacturers for a specific paper will appear in this box here. So here on my computer here, you will see the Canson Infinity profiles for my 200,000 series Epson printer, and all the different papers that I use are all listed here. So if I wanted to emulate what this image was going to look like on, say, an Arch-88 paper, a matte paper, I would click onto that and it will emulate, provided I have the simulate paper and ink box checked, it will emulate how this image is going to look. So if I toggle back and forth by hitting the S key on the keyboard, this is what the file actually looks like, and this is what approximately it would look like when printed on the Arch-88 paper. You'll notice that the contrast is lower and it's giving us an approximate effect of what it might look like. Okay, so what we need to do now is, of course, make the adjustment. And before we do that, we need to click on Create Proof Copy. So what this will do is it will create a virtual copy of the image. So any tonal adjustments that we'll make to this new version of the file will be done just to the copy and not the original. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go into my masking tab here. I'm going to click onto it, and I'm going to scroll down to range, and I'm going to click on luminance range. Okay, so we want to target the darker values. So the luminance range is represented by this box here, and if I click onto it, you will see that the image goes red. That means that currently the mask is being applied to the entire image. On the left hand side here, we have our shadows, our midtones in the middle, and our highlights on the right hand side. So in order for me to take this effect, or whatever I want to do, whether it's adding contrast, whether I want to brighten a specific area, I want to take it away, say from the brightest parts of the image, I'll click onto the triangle here on the bottom, and I will shift that to the left, and you can see the mask disappearing from the brightest areas, and I will keep on moving it until I hit the target of the areas that I want to affect. Now you'll notice at the moment that the transition between these areas and the non-affected areas is quite harsh. For me to feather that, I can click on the tab here in the middle, and I can move that to the left, and that will give me a transition, a smoother transition, or a feathering if you like. That'll make the adjustment look a little bit more natural. Once I've done that, of course, I can come down to either my exposure tab to make those areas a little bit brighter, or I could use something like a curve and push up the midtone. Regardless, I mean, I can do whatever I want to this image, okay? And once I'm happy with that, I can go and print it. Now, before we do though, pay particular attention to the rendering intents, and you'll see the two words here, perceptual and relative. What are rendering intents? Rendering intents give us the option on how the color is mathematically converted when we go from one device to another. Okay, we have two options. We have the perceptual option and we have the relative option. Okay, so let me just bring up a diagram so to make you understand this a little bit better. So let's look at relative colorimetric first. So with relative colorimetric, what happens with relative colorimetric when you have colors that are outside the gamut of what the paper can actually print? These outer gamut colors get squashed in and brought in to the nearest color possible that the printer paper combination can actually print. Everything else though in the middle stays the same. Now be mindful that if you have a really saturated image with fine subtle tones in bright colors, what might happen in a relative colorimetric rendering intent scenario is that those areas will become just a solid blob of color, but everything else will still have the tonality. With perceptual though, what happens is that these outer gamut colors get brought into gamut, but they're relative relationship between one another in tonality is maintained. Now this happens by a slight loss of saturation overall. So this is perceptually, visually more, I believe, more pleasing than a relative colorimetric conversion. Having said that though, there is no right or wrong. Some images will look better with a relative colorimetric rendering intent, and some image will print better with a perceptual rendering intent, depending on the type of image that you're printing. And we can see this with color images as well. So with a color image here in our soft proofing scenario up the top here, if we want to know what colors for this particular paper combination, actually let's pick another paper. Let's pick something like a Prestige 2, which has a very wide color gamut. And if we click onto that little icon on the right hand side, which looks like a little folded piece of paper, if I click onto that, the areas now that are shown here in red are areas that are going to be at a gamut for that particular paper. So if I want to adjust those and bring them into gamut, I can once again create a proof copy. I can go down to my HSL adjustments and I can click onto the saturation tab, click my little dial here, click on the red carpet and just reduce the saturation ever so slightly. So now I've targeted exactly those colors that I want to be brought back into gamut. And once I'm happy with that, I can export a version of this image for me to print on the Barada Prestige paper. And of course, another thing to consider is that these rendering intents, of course, will appear in your printer driver as an option when you do your print. So make sure that you are clicking on the one that's going to give you the best result. Okay, let's go back to our image. Now, assuming that we've finished with the shadows, but feel that maybe we want to add a little bit more pop to our highlights. How do we do that? Well, we'll do that exactly the same way by going into our plus icon up here, which creates a new mask, selecting the luminance range. But this time, instead of going from highlight to shadow, we're going to go from shadow to highlight. So we click on the little triangle and we push it to the right. So we're taking the mask away from the shadows, and then we click on our little tab that's going to feather it. Okay, so now we're selecting the brightest parts of the image, and then I can come in and I can bump up the highlights to make them a little bit more luminous. And I really like what's happening here to the area of the dress, but perhaps up here, if I turn on my mask, this mask here is making the sky a little bit too bright. So I'm going to subtract from it. So I'm going to hit the subtract button and I'm going to use a brush, and I'm going to go nice and big, and we're going to remove that effect from the top here so that I'm only affecting the highlight areas of the dress, making the image look a little bit punchier. So we've brightened the highlights and we've added a little bit more shadow detail. As far as soft proofing is concerned, in Photoshop here we're going to View, Proof Setup, Custom, and we can select our paper profile here, whether we're printing on an H88 or a Platine or whatever we might want to print on, our rendering intent, our relative colorimetric, or our perceptual. And once again, we've got to make sure we simulate paper and color. That box needs to be checked for us to see the effect that this image will have when printed on a specific paper. Finally, we need to discuss paper choice. Selecting the right fine art paper for awards is an art form in itself. You have to consider the characteristics of different papers and how they will enhance your image. Now we can break these down into 4 broad areas. Number 1 is Dmax, or density. That's a function of how much black ink the paper can hold. And the more black the paper can hold, the more contrast it will have, and the richer the shadows and the more shadow separation you will also have. This characteristic is often combined with the optical brightness of paper, which affects your white point. The base color of the paper is also a very important factor to consider. Some papers are quite neutral, meaning that they don't interfere with the accurate color reproduction, whilst others are quite warm in nature. Another quality is surface texture. Whether it has no texture at all, which means it's very smooth, whether it has some texture which will perhaps give your image another dimension that might enhance your narrative. And finally, the last quality is reflectivity. In other words, how reflective the surface of the paper is. Like like a semi-gloss, a luster paper, or even a satin paper. Now this quality will give the printed image a totally different look. Keep in mind that selecting a gloss or semi-gloss luster paper, the reflections can impede the judges from seeing into the subtleties of the tonality because of the lighting and viewing geometry. Remember, the choice of paper can influence the judge's perception of your photograph. Now I'm going to share with you my go-to papers for award printing. The two main choices of paper are matte papers and of course the Baryta style papers. Now matte papers will yield a lower contrast print due to the nature of the surface as opposed to the Baryta style papers. However, having said that, one matte paper that defies this phenomenon is the Canson Infinity R88. It is a matte paper, but it is the brightest and most neutral paper on the market today, without using any optical brightening agents. It has an incredible smooth surface, and the unique inkjet receiving layer of the R88, combined with its neutral bright base, enables it to produce prints with superb colour rendition, deep blacks and natural whites. This will provide you with the ability to create images with a superb tonal range, excellent highlights and midtones. The result is a luminous print that truly captures the essence of the original image and provides a faithful representation of your original vision. An alternative to this paper, if you like something a little bit more textured, is the Canson Infinity BFK Reeves papers. Now there are two different versions of this paper, the BFK Reeves White and the BFK Reeves Pure White. The Pure White is similar characteristics as the R88, not as bright of course, and it has this beautiful texture that is velvet-like, adding perhaps an element of interest to your print. Now the BFK White version has a warmer base and the same surface characteristics as the Pure White. Last but definitely not least is the Baryta Prestige 2, a remarkable paper that for me captures the essence of traditional darkroom Baryta papers while embracing the latest in our printing technologies. It has a very wide colour gamut that ensures vibrant and precise colours. Perfectly neutral white base, allowing you to maintain perfect colour reproduction. In conclusion, the journey from digital photograph to an award-worthy fine art print requires meticulous attention to every detail. From monitor calibration to navigating the pitfalls unique to awards, we've covered the basic essentials. Now remember that each print is not just an image, it's a piece of art meticulously crafted to achieve the highest quality and recognition it deserves. My name is Rocco Ancora, Canson Infinity Ambassador, and I take this opportunity to wish you all the very best in your print competition adventures.